Hello, good day from Stepanakert. It's November 3 and EVN has been in Stepanakert for this is our third trip to Stepanakert right now. We've been here for several days now. Follow us for more of the reports from the region, but right now we've sat down with Artak Beglaryan, the human rights defender of Artsakh. Thank you very much, Mr. Beglaryan, for having us and speaking with us. I know you're very busy. We spoke once. It was during the first week of the conflict and the situation, and especially in the front of the human rights abuses and the war crimes has changed drastically. Let's maybe catch up on that first, please.
There is a lot to say since then, but we can firstly talk on the consequences with numbers. Firstly, we should say that those crimes mean consequences on human lives and on material damages. On human lives, now we have recorded by now at least 46 deaths among civilians and at least 142 wounded among civilians. But these numbers are quite preliminary because we have some data that there are some other casualties, but we don't have enough information to say that they are verified now, especially in the villages and in the towns that have been occupied or entered by the Azerbaijani subversive groups. We will check the information and we will update the numbers. All of those casualties have been recorded in all areas geographically of the Republic, from north to south, from borderline communities to the deepest communities, and with different ways and weapons and methods, with both striking drones, rockets, missiles, artillery shelling, but also gunshots and beheadings with knife, let's say. And these statistics shows that the crimes have been perpetrated mostly deliberately, somewhat indiscriminately. And it means that there is an intention by the Azerbaijani armed forces to kill as much Armenians as possible, including war prisoners, civilian internees, etc., etc. And coming to the material damages, we have recorded approximately, because the number is too high, that's why approximately, 13,100 houses and apartments and shops have been damaged seriously or slightly or destroyed totally. At least 2,700 infrastructures have been damaged or destroyed, including electricity stations, networks, telecommunication stations and networks, water pipelines, gas pipelines, bridges, etc. And including public institutions and economic institutions, kindergartens, schools, hospitals, cultural centers, cathedral, and factories.
Mr. Beglaryan, however, your messaging and rhetoric has also changed since the first week when you were reporting and at the time still waiting for an adequate response. However, especially from what I noticed after the bombing of the maternity ward here in Stepanakert, your rhetoric changed and almost laid blame on the international community for their inaction. Your tagline, you were saying, "Don't be blind, act." And I want to kind of ask at this point, is there something to be done further, something that we should still do, or more that we can report on to finally expect an adequate response from the international adequate authorities?
Actually, yes. In the beginning, I had high expectations from the international community. Firstly, I had expectation that there should not be any war, and the war should have been prevented. Since it has not been prevented, in the beginning, on the first days, I had the expectation that it should be stopped, also with support or with pressure of the international community. And since we have war by now, also after free ceasefire announcements, and they saw that the Azerbaijani side doesn't keep the ceasefire agreements reached on October 10, 17, and 25, my disappointment has gone further. And that's why my rhetoric has been changed, and it's now tougher than before. And I think that the international community has failed to do its responsibilities, both in terms of prevention, but also in terms of protection of civilian population, protection of human rights. And I don't see real actions by the international community. Yes, there are statements. Yes, some of them are strong, some of them are addressable or targeted to certain perpetrators, to certain parties. But mostly they are either vague in terms of the targets or perpetrators, or they have artificial parity between Armenian and Azerbaijani sides, which is quite unfair because everyone knows who started the war. Everyone knows who rejected actually the ceasefire agreements or announcements. And everyone knows who are committing war crimes here, and everyone knows who are protecting themselves.
Well, this begs the question, so why would the international community not act? And or if they do not, the system is set up in a way that they are not equipped with the tools to act, or with the will to act, or with the freedom to act, because after all this, which there's no longer, we're not doubting anything. Everything is very clear for us, and we assume that everything should be very clear for everyone else. Yet the reaction is not adequate. What would be the reasons for that?
I can only guess, but my guess, or even my confidence is that it's not the reason that they don't have the instruments. For sure they have the instruments by international law. They can have lots of have and use lots of instruments, including political pressure, including economic sanctions, military sanctions, even including a responsibility to protect or humanitarian intervention even. It's the last way, or the last instrument that they can use. But before that, they should use all the other instruments that they have not used. They used only political pressure somewhat, which is not so visible publicly, but there are some reports that such kind of pressure there is, especially against Turkey and Azerbaijan. But since they don't work, and especially since Turkey and Azerbaijan are authoritarian regimes. I think that political dialogue, political pressure, negotiations, or I don't know, persuading them doesn't work. And that's why the international community has all the ways, all the rights and instruments to use sanctions. Political, military, economic, etc. Because these regimes understand the language when you affect their benefits, their interests very directly. And they don't use such kind of sanctions. That's why there is, I don't know, there is such kind of tough position by Azerbaijan and Turkey, and also they are continuing war crimes. Even they are striking maternity hospital, or I don't know, any other humanitarian objects and personnel.
Not to overgeneralize it, however, any first attempt at a sanction with banning Turkish goods in France has resulted in a number of yet unconfirmed as to who's behind it, but also a number of terrorist attacks in Europe. So as such, there's also blackmailing of the international community against using the whole toolbox that would be at their disposal if they were to use it, or if they were to see that we're at a point where this toolbox needs to be opened up. So what should be the general response to this? Because it seems to have already spread beyond Artsakh and Armenia, the tension. And the same mentality that's fueling this war is also fueling a lot of tension in Europe right now.
Actually, Artak is only one of the contexts, or one of the parts of the entire context of Turkish or Turkic European relationship, mostly European, but not only, including Russian American relationship. And since now the hottest point is Artsakh in the world and in the region especially, that's why it has played and it will play an essential role in that relationship. But since Europe also faces terroristic acts, including in France, in Nice, and in Vienna, in that case, I guess that at least Europeans understand that the risk is too high. That the Turkish and Islamic threat is again going to Europe and is a serious threat to their security, not only to their interest politically, but also to their security domestically. And everyone understands that now in the world Turkey is number one leader or manager of terroristic groups in Syria, in Libya, and in other countries. And we alarmed, or we warned in the beginning of this war, that engaging terroristic groups from different countries through support of Turkey by Azerbaijan against us, it will work against the world. And in a short time, they already witnessed the results, because they didn't stop such kind of terrorist feeding policy here against us. And they saw, and they will see, unfortunately, that this terroristic threat is being spread.
And yesterday we saw the long-awaited UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, her announcement, which was saying that basically there was possible war crimes happening, being perpetrated by Azerbaijan. And another sentence in this statement that stuck out for me, that international humanitarian law cannot be clearer. So my question is, in case of such clarity, why this indecisiveness or inclarity on how to act?
Actually, I can't say what she meant finally, but I understood that she realized the war crimes and the volume of war crimes here, but there is I don't know, need to be much more careful, because it's not she that should say there are war crimes. Probably she thinks that courts should decide whether it's war crime or not. But I'm sure that she clearly understands, and she will accept privately, that there are many war crimes, because she has all the proofs. Also, just I sent many proofs to her office, with official letters, with emails, etc. She has many public sources, including international independent media, reporting on war crimes, showing the proofs, etc. But it seems that she has some sensitive topics, including political ones, to be careful, and also to keep artificial parity. But that's a huge problem in the international community, that by now they have kept artificial parity between us and between Azerbaijan, and because of that too, Azerbaijan feels much free to commit new war crimes and to stay unpunished. And another topic, another stress by UN High Commissioner is important for us, that she's saying that entering conflict areas should not be politicized, and UN monitoring bodies should have access to conflict areas. It's important, at least, to stress that there is politicizing of such kind of topics, but it's pity for me to understand that even UN High Commissioner only says that it should not be politicized, but she doesn't do anything to overcome these obstacles, because
the solution be a political decision by the UN to come into Artsakh and do their own fact-finding mission in this case, because what is the higher power beyond the United Nations that would decide whether or not the UN would do its job and follow Article 2 of the Human Rights Law, which says regardless whether or not the territory is recognized or not, or what political atmosphere there is, human rights are human rights.
Actually, it can be political decision, but even without political decision, UN High Commissioner has the responsibility, not only the right, but also the responsibility to visit everywhere in the world. Because all the countries, all the territories, all the corners of the globe are under UN protection. And all the people of the world, including myself, yourself, should be under UN protection. And High Commissioner is High Commissioner for everyone's rights. And it's a problem for unrecognized states, and especially for Artsakh, that we are highly isolated from the international community. They have responsibility, but just they are politicizing this issue, because they are asking access, they are asking permission from Azerbaijan. And Azerbaijan doesn't allow that, because Azerbaijan very clearly understands that when they come here, they will record many war crimes here, many human rights violations, atrocities here. That's why Azerbaijan keeps us isolated from international community, which is led by the international community.
Well, I would just like to understand that these are both are political decisions to decide to just come to Artsakh and do your own work, fact-finding, carry out your responsibilities, and to decide to ask Azerbaijan and therefore not come eventually. So these two
both of them are political decisions, and both Azerbaijan and UN and also Council of Europe and other organizations keep the same political atmosphere. That's why they don't have right even to complain about politicizing this issue, because they are responsible for that.
Well, you earlier spoke about courts, and I was wondering if the European Court of Human Rights is the institution at this point that would help us overcome a lot of the obstacles like the political decisions of the international community, obstacles like the lack of international fact-finding missions here, obstacles, something like you said, proving which side is the perpetrator and which side is not. Is the European Court of Human Rights the one of our last resorts at this point, where the international community would, without doubt, without further politicizing everything, would have to face the facts?
Actually, European Court of Human Rights is one of the courts, platforms that can do something, but it has some problems because there are many decisions by European Court of Human Rights against Azerbaijan that Azerbaijan has not done anything. And there are some levers, but those levers are mostly political levers, instruments, not legal ones. And they don't have serious ways of sanctioning Azerbaijan or other countries. There are some other courts, for example, International Court of Justice, International Criminal Court, etc., that also can deal with those war crimes, but it's up to political decision of both sides, including Armenia. There are many factors to consider before applying to these courts and before having decisions there.
Well, and maybe one last question about something that, well, from what I understand, has been used for quite some time now, but it has come to the media's attention recently, the use of white phosphorus.
Mm-hmm.
Has it been confirmed that it's white phosphorus? And also, because there are media reports that about 1,515 hectares of community-owned forests are on fire currently in Artsakh, or have been set on fire. What's the latest developments and on that front?
Actually, there is alleged use of white phosphorus, but we need to verify it with international experts. I have sent the videos and the materials to some international experts, but I don't have yet their feedback. But some experts say that it is or it could be white phosphorus, because it's quite similar to white phosphorus. But even without that fact, it's much more important to say that Azerbaijan is burning our forests, regardless of the fact whether it's white phosphorus or not. And it has serious environmental consequence long term for our health, for our environmental security. And already, yes, 15 hectares have been burned or on fire, and the number is increasing sharply because they are continuing firing our forests, but also the fires are being spread now. And I can't assess now how much and what kind of effects we will have, short term, long term, but it's quite visible already that it has huge environmental damage on flora, on fauna, and on us, on civilians. But one of the reasons why they are firing our forests, I think, is that they know that there are civilians and also militaries hiding in the forests. In some places there are fightings in the forest. In other places there are civilians who have fled their homes, their villages, and they are hiding in the forest. And burning the forest, they understand, or they aim at burning those people there.
I said it was the last one, but yet another question.
It's okay.
It's just a more personal question. For me, I'd like to understand this. Azerbaijan reports higher numbers of civilian casualties, and I was also having been in Stepanakert all this time.
Mm-hmm.
I realized that people have been evacuated from the cities. That is why we do not have more, hundreds and hundreds and more civilian casualties. What is the case in Azerbaijan, in Ganja, in the other cities that they claim Armenians have bombed? Have they evacuated their citizens? And if they haven't, despite the warnings from the Artsakh government that have listed all the sites that would be legitimate military sites that would be legitimate targets, and have asked for the evacuation of the civilian population of the city, have they evacuated? And if not, would this be considered just a crime against their own population?
Actually, important question, because yes, it's right that they have and they are striking our civilian populated areas, residential buildings, very intensively. And if we have normal life here, if the people have not been fled their homes or stayed at basements, in that case we will have now thousands of civilians died and wounded. But fortunately, they are striking our residential buildings when they are empty. And we have large number of destructions. As I said, more than 13,000 houses and apartments have been destroyed or destructed, but the casualties are, in comparison, are low. In Ganja or Barda, though they are claiming that we Armenians targeted those buildings, I don't have enough proofs to say, especially that Azerbaijan is quite close to the international media and human rights monitoring bodies, and they are inclined to falsify many facts. It's their nature, the nature of the Azerbaijani government. To have fake news, to falsify the facts, etc. But in our terms, I am seeking to be much more professional, and without verifying any fact, I don't publish. Without verifying the names, the identity of the casualties, I don't publish the names. But it's important. I don't know what happened in Barda, in Ganja, but it's important that from Artsakh side there were for some time there were warning that since the Azerbaijani militaries are using their cities, towns, villages against us for military purposes, those military objectives are legitimate objectives for us. That's why there was a warning to the Azerbaijani public that leave your homes. but they have not left, or the Azerbaijani government didn't organize their evacuation. It's already a crime against its own society, and it shows the intention of the Azerbaijani government to use their population as human shielding, which is considered as a war crime by international humanitarian law.
Thank you very much for your time and for speaking with us, and for everyone who watched the interview, follow EVN Report. We're still in Artsakh, and we'll be reporting more from here.